Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev, where today we continue working on our Demake about vegetation versus the undead. Now, last time we pumped the brakes on the struct approach to make sure that they weren't to blame for the potential performance issues. To do this, we instead tried to use nested arrays and enums to store plant and projectile data, and the results showed that the structs weren't the source of the issues after all. Which brings us to today's plan. We will not only be returning to the use of structs, but improving said usage in the process. We'll also be making several major changes to the project, including the switch from sprites to tiles. And we'll make any other accommodations along the way that'll hopefully leave us with a more optimized experience. Sounds like a plan, so let's get to the coding. First up was simplifying the struct code. I went a little too hard on the struct usage, and so all we really needed for now were type and HP variables for our plant structs. Sprite and HP values for the struct/function would be determined via global arrays, which are easily identifiable via enum. Then, to test this updated struct still worked, I had the sprites and their HP values drawn to the screen. And it's here that you can... oh, wait a minute. Are those 10s or 0s? Hold on. Let's change the color of the text. Okay, right. So yeah, as you can see, we are no longer using the Tiger Electronics theme for the visual aspect of our game. This is because I had planned to use sprites and surfaces to do some fun stuff, but since sprites are a little too hefty on the performance, another approach is required. So to keep within similar styles, at least sprite-wise, 1-bit monochrome is our new direction. So here we go. In order to shift to tiles, we need tile sets, tile maps, and tile layers. Now, it's been a while, so this took a little to set up, but eventually we had 2 layers of tiles for plants and projectiles. Next came the hard part, updating all our code to work with the tiles instead of sprites. This was a painfully tedious process. I started with trying to add a tile map update system to the tick function before moving it to its own global function. Whenever used, the function would clear both tile layers and re-add tiles based on plant/projectile data stored in their respective grid or list entries. And I'll just say, in general, it would have been smarter to simply rewrite everything from scratch, because instead I tried converting a ton of positioning data to match the way that tiles are drawn, and it ended up causing a ton of issues. Admittedly, I was really tired this session, but the main issue that kept popping up was restricting placement to just the play area, which has its own margins because not every space on the screen allows plants to be placed. So instead of simply checking for the positions within that play area, I had to expand the check to the play area within context of the room itself. And keeping track of all the times these checks were made is what made this process so tedious. It's also why I'm not going over in detail what changes I've made over time. Whenever one thing was changed, something elsewhere needed updating as well before those changes would make sense in the updated context. Also, fun fact, apparently in GameMaker, when a tile value is invalid, instead of spitting out an error, it will just draw a tile anyway? This is what caused me the most confusion since, I kept expecting error messages for my errors. Anyway, eventually I was able to restrict positioning to the play area, and thus plant placement was finally achievable. And on top of that, the translation of producing projectiles was also, finally, working in context of this new system. But there was still an issue. The projectiles weren't showing up. So more time was spent going over the code. Theoretically, it should have worked. I even drew the structs to the screen as they were created, and even the code was like, yup, that should be working. Yet no projectiles would show up. And after an extended period of frustratingly poking at random code, starting to regret my life decisions, it dawned on me. When shifting the code to a global function, I forgot to set the projectile type to be dynamic. And so yes, the code was working, but I was drawing blank tiles due to the way that GameMaker handles tile sets. So changing that dang value to use the type argument instead finally gave us visible projectiles. And with our visuals working like they should have much earlier in the session, we could now test performance. And would you look at that? The same visual clutter as sprites, but we're still able to maintain a really solid and high FPS. I honestly can't think of a better way to visualize the difference in using tiles and sprites than this. I also honestly can't believe it took me so long just to do these conversions. Regardless, the FPS counter makes the pain worth it and now puts us in the perfect spot to continue working on actual mechanics. And with the new art style to boot, the future of this project is looking pretty dang good. But for now, I need to rest my poor brain, which brings us to the end of today's episode of Let's Dev. So leave a like if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already, and leave your thoughts on our progress in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.